time to shift gears. This is the Man Shift Guide.
Welcome back to another episode of the Man Shift Guide. I got it right this time. I kept calling this by an old podcast that I had before. It was kind of the predecessor, if you will. I called it Managing Manhood. Uh, I don't do that anymore. I do this, the Man Shift Guide. I remember the name this time, so it's awesome. Pats on back. So I'm here today with Peter, and Peter has a fantastic story. I've been talking to him for a couple of weeks now,
About
and
that, yeah.
he showed me some stuff that he's been involved with. He is a uh, how to say he's in the movie making industry, if you will, writing screenplays. We just talked about how he has something that has been in development for a TV show. He's written books, but that's really not the topic of the conversation today. Um, Today we want to talk about more of the things that Peter has overcame. And in this documentary, which I will link in the description, kind of talked about how he's dealt with substance abuse in the past, how he's um, tried to even unalive himself. And he tells a story about how he was about to step off a ledge of a building and he had this experience that kind of took it all away from him. And I'm very curious about all of that and how that went on in your life, Peter. So I guess without giving much more away than that, we can just kind of start with you introducing yourself and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you. First of all, I wanna say thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate our conversations in the last couple of weeks. They've been very insightful, and I'm just totally grateful for you and your show. Um, well, I my name is Peter, and I was born deaf, and I was deaf until I was 11. I had 13 operations on my tonsils, and my adenoids were both removed. Um, to gain my hearing, I had permanent and semi-permanent ear tubes put in my ears that wouldn't they didn't work for many years. Um, and throughout that time, I was also diagnosed with bipolar and manic depression. Back then, they didn't really know what to call bipolar. So they labeled it explosive anger disorder or something along those lines. I've been on pretty much every antidepressant you can think of, from Zoloft to Wellbutrin to even Prozac, which is more of an anxiety medication, to lithium, to what I'm on now, which is Depakote ER. Um, I also have epilepsy. I've been in numerous ambulances because of that. Most of them were drug related because I did have a very long stint of drug abuse, mostly alcohol and marijuana, mushrooms at times. And I had been to 6 rehabs. My first rehab was in Conifer Park, which was a very nice facility. It was huge, a lot of loving people there. And when I was supposed to go home after the 28 days initially, I begged them to stay. So I ended up staying for 2 months. And then, I relapsed again, which is the case, I guess. And my whole life was filled with a lot of anger at myself, a lot of hateful type things towards myself. I didn't hate other people. I didn't want anybody else to die or anything. I just didn't like myself. I hated being alive. I didn't like breathing. There was a lot to it. I was a musician from a young age. I played an awful lot of shows, festivals, sold out festivals. And that kind of atmosphere also led to a lot of drugs and poor choices. Um, and then I quit the band and I had kids, and I would keep having thoughts like, I didn't ask them if they wanted to be born. I'm a horrible father because I never gave them a choice, and like they would be better off without me around, those kind of things. And while I sit here now, I can remember those things. And, at the time it would make me depressed, but it doesn't anymore. So I went to South Carolina to pick up my two godsons who had just graduated from the Marines. And we were in a really nice hotel. Everybody was, having a great time seeing them after 8 months of them being gone. And, they're really close with us. And so we went out there and everybody's having a great time. And me, I'm just in this whole I have to die thing. I couldn't get out of it. I was just so overly depressed that I couldn't see the fun. I couldn't see the joy in anything. I really, 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 really hated myself. And so when everybody went to sleep, I tried to commit suicide. I walked out on the edge of a balcony that the room I was staying at, which was on the third floor. And I remember myself saying things like, you can make it look like an accident. Maybe this could be a good thing for your family. Maybe they could benefit from it. Those intrusive, horrible, negative thoughts that you get. Um, and at the moment, I had that final, I'm done with everything. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I got angry and I screamed out, I yelled out to what I didn't believe in, and that's Jesus. At the time I was very much against Jesus, and I had been against Jesus for a long time. I blamed him for things that had happened in my life, the disconnection with my father, the disconnection with people, the hating myself. I blamed him for everything. Um, which is, I think, normal, at certain ages. Depends on what you're around, I guess. But so I called out to him and I said things to him that I wish I didn't say. Honestly, it's pretty derogatory things. But I, in a nutshell, told him that, if there's something for me, you have to show it to me, because I don't want to do it anymore. I don't. I'm done. And in that moment, I felt instantaneously, I felt something turn my heart. My heart literally felt it a turn. I don't know how to really explain it into words other than that. And all the depression and anger and fear and self-doubt washed out of my body, like just right out of my body. And I cried profusely for the rest of the time I was on this trip. And they didn't understand why. My family kept looking at me and going, "It's okay. What are you so upset about?" And I couldn't get the words out, because the amount of love I felt in my soul at that moment was enough for me to understand that Jesus loved me that much to save me. And he did. He saved me completely. My depression has been gone since. My anger has been gone since. I turned around and, I'm like, what's my purpose? What am I here for? And I couldn't get the story out of my head. It kept hitting me in the head like a hammer. It was in between me crying profusely. I couldn't stop thinking about this character. I couldn't stop thinking about this story. And so I wrote it. And it's the first novel I came out with, my debut, called The Endless Fall. And ever since that, I mean, everything else has just kind of sort of taken off from that point. And I feel like that was my purpose, was to write something that could get me somewhere to help other people. And just to go into it just a tad bit, The Endless Fall is about a girl named Ivy who struggles through abuse, depression, nightmares of her own suicide, to find and keep Jesus in her life while trying to protect her younger brother, Ethan. In a nutshell, that's what the story is. And a lot of it is how I felt, my struggle with faith, my growing up, my depression, the nightmares that I used to have, which I take medication now so that I don't reach REMs, because they were that bad. I would have night terrors all the time. And thinking about it, kind of brings back emotion a little bit because it's tough to go through that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? When you're going through it, you're like, oh, this is just my life. And there's just more anger and negativity, right? But when you're saved, when Jesus saves you, you know, your life changes, completely changes, And I think I had to give my life to him. I think I had to like just finally let go and say, you know what? It's not suicide that I want. It's life. It's life in him. That's what I needed. I needed that kind of love and direction, and I got that. I got that in an instant. I got it. And it hasn't left me, you know, and I'm grateful, extremely grateful, because I know that he's put out these things in my path for me to succeed. I know that he's there with me. I feel that he has taken my life and just basically told me you're going to be fine. I've got you. You don't have to feel that way anymore because I won't let you, you know. And even when bad things are happening, I mean, I lost my mom in July. Um if that hadn't have happened to me on that balcony, I would have been a wreck. I would have been a wreck to lose my mother because my mother was an angel to me. She was amazing. She always cared about me all the time. She never gave up. She cared about my friends. She cared about my family. But I know that she's with him. And I would have never known that if he didn't save me, you know? So I owe every single thing in my life to Jesus, everything. And in a nutshell, I guess that's it.
Amazing, powerful testimony that you shared there. And listening to that story, it kind of sounds like you kind of had like this three phase of life. You talk
Mhm.
about, having been born and struggling with your difficulties. And then you mentioned being a musician.
Yes.
And then some people are probably like, wait a minute, when did that happen? And if you
Mhm.
do watch the documentary, you talk about how you wanted to learn how to play drums. And then
Yes.
one
Yes.
day magically somehow you were able to hear it when you were doing
Yes.
it. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you were just like, I don't want to use, I throw out my fingers like cured of your deafness. I mean, not
Right. Yeah.
necessarily cured because you've had the surgeries and stuff, but you talk about like somehow the vibrations of the drums were
Yes.
somehow did something
Yes.
to like just make whatever happened clicked and you were able to hear again.
Right. So what happened basically was I had had the operations and all that time. And in some of those instances, I would hear momentarily, but it would be garbled, like, sounds that I couldn't really differentiate. And plus, because I was, deaf for all that time, learning English was like, so some of the stuff I wouldn't even understand anyways, because I didn't go through it regularly. Um, and there was times where I would go to school. There was and make it through. Minor times where I would have some hearing, and then there was a whole 2 years that I missed out of school. So I missed second grade twice because I had so many operations and was just completely deaf. But what happened with that was, um, at the age of like 11ish, I wanted to play drums. I wanted to play music. Even though I couldn't hear it, even though da da da. I just I wanted to do it. I don't know why I wanted to do it, but I did want to do it. And my father came to me, and one of the best things he's ever done in my life. And I still remember this memory, and it hits me home because of how things were. My father became an amazing person. He became an amazing person, but it took him many years to get to being that. You know what I mean? And I'm so grateful for that too, because I have a relationship with my father that's a great one. I love my dad, to where when I was younger, I didn't. I was very against him, um, for many reasons. Some of them were just stupid reasons because I was always depressed. You know how kids are. But I'm glad I grew up to see that. Anyways, so um, he had written down on a piece of paper, or I had written down on a piece of paper, and I said, I want to play drums. you know, or I want drums. I can't really remember exactly how I wrote it, but I was, young. And so he brought out a lunchbox with two pencils and he said, so then make a beat. And I did. And I didn't, I never got trained or anything. I just was a natural at it. So then my father turned around 3 days later and bought me the first drum set he saw at Big Apple Music. And he brought it home. And my birthday was about a month after that. So he set it in the computer room, stacked on top of it of each other, and wouldn't let me touch it until my birthday, which drove me nuts, But either way, so I started playing it again. Didn't have any lessons, didn't know how to set it up, just knew where things would go. I'm not sure what that was. When I look back at it, I very much think it was God. I think it was His way of trying to help me, um, and it did. Drumming helped me a lot. About maybe 3, 4 months into drumming, I still had the operations. At this time, I had semi-permanent tubes in my ears, which are very little, tiny, tiny. I mean, they're super tiny. You could barely even see them. Tubes, they're like green, and they go inside your ears and they stretch out your ear canal, right? So that you can leak fluid because my eardrums kept bursting. They would burst and I would be in so much pain. My mom would have to put a hair dryer on my ears to calm down the swelling in my ears, right? And I even climbed underneath a heater once because the swelling was so bad. Like the sides of my ears here would get really big because it would swell up and they would fill with, blood and pus and whatever. Not to be gross, but that's how it was. And so that's what the tubes were put in there for. They weren't put in to make me hear; they were put in to drain, right? And then hopefully with that, the swelling would go down and I would be able to hear, right? But they never really worked. They worked momentarily, and then my ears would pop, and it would do the same thing over and over and over again. So that's why I had to keep on having so many operations. Um, but once I started playing the drums, after about 3 or 4 months, my ears popped, blood came out, and this time, instead of being completely deaf, I could hear everything, every little minute sound. And it was strange to me because I had never heard like that before, right? I go out in the kitchen and I'm covered in blood, like blood is coming down my face. My mom looks at me and she goes, "What happened? What's wrong?" Because it was more than normal because the ear tubes were in there. So the ear tubes were there to help drain it, right? So it was coming out like fast. My mom thought maybe I was injured, because usually it wasn't that bad. It would pop and there would be some stuff, but it wouldn't be like crazy going down. And so she's like, "Oh my God, what happened?" She goes to like grab my face, and I said, "I can hear you." And she's like, "What?" And I said, "I can hear you. I can hear your voice. I can hear you." And she, started crying, freaking out. I went to the doctors, and about, I don't know, maybe 6 months later or so, they finally came back and I got my hearing from that day on. I haven't had a problem since. They said that because of the vibrations of either a musical instrument or some kind of machinery or something, and I told him, we eventually told him of drums. He's been playing drums for like 3 or 4 months now. And he said that because of that, the vibrations were able to grow hairs inside my ears, and make them stay straight the way they're supposed to. Uh, uh, Something between the decibels of the bass kick and the highness of the snare together, and then the in between pitch of the hi hat, balanced it in a way. And I like to think that's God, because it's super hard to explain in a way that people would understand it. You know what I mean? I had to get it explained to me a couple of times before I really wrapped my mind around what it meant. You know what I mean? And so that was the conclusion that they came up with. They constantly told my parents, make sure that you're bringing him in every month to get his raise your hand tests, those tests. I've done about 600, 700 of those tests. I had to do so many of them. And ever since then, they all came back perfect. My hearing has been great. And I started playing shows right off of that. I was playing bars when I was 13 years old. I dove into it, and then being around all that loud noise and everything else, you would think would totally destroy your hearing, but it's made my hearing better. I don't know. Um, so I think I was born without the ability to grow hair in my ears, although that's never been fully said. But because of what happened, I believe that that's probably what it was. But in my soul, I know it's God. I know God did that for a reason. There was a purpose for me to have hearing.
So, okay. And we talked earlier about having purpose and stuff. And now that you've gotten your hair in your ears and your hearing, and
Yes.
right off the bat, you started playing music. So that was kind of your purpose, was like that was your thing,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
what
At that
drive that
time. Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what drove you. Um, you hooked up with a band, and then
Mhm.
you guys started playing shows, not knowing the name of the band or anything of that nature. And then that's when you kind of dove into like the drug lifestyle, being around
Yeah.
those people and having that stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess like my question for you, and this is kind of more of like an opinion-based question on your side, is that do you feel like as you were playing music and you were doing all these things, was there still like that piece of you that was kind of like missing? And that's what kind of led you to that? Because like you at the time you were doing something that a lot of people wish they could be doing, right? Like they want to be
Yes.
playing music, they want to be out,
Yeah.
and they feel like that's what's gonna bring them their joy and their happiness, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
here you were doing it, but yet there's still kind of a part of you that wasn't being fulfilled at that time.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like playing shows was and always will be my greatest, love, right? Other than my children. That would be my greatest thing. If I could, I would go back out and play shows and I love doing it, right? But you're right. As I was playing those shows, I was still trying to fill some emptiness in me with a lot of the drugs, a lot of the people I hung out with, making sure that I had shows booked every single weekend, and just living that kind of lifestyle and putting other things that were important aside. But yeah, I did feel like there was a part of me that was missing.
Yeah. Yeah. And feel like, I got my cue of saying like, time is gonna wrap up here on Zoom. And we're for sure going to have to do this like a part two and even maybe a part three with
Yeah,
this.
fantastic.
And you just have such a great energy about you and such a great story. And I'm just like so totally like invested in this right now that we for sure have to keep going on this. And I'm sure those of you who are listening are gonna be searching for the next one. And in the meantime, you do have that book and you have sent in your ways of finding that. So we will be putting that in the description. So we could do that and anything else that you sent me, like the link to the documentary, so they can get a little bit more. And in the meantime, I guess to wrap this up, just wow, man. So I'm
Thank you.
grateful for you being here today, and
Yes, thank you so much for having me, man.
yeah, and
Great.
will for sure continue this in the next one.
Yes, we definitely will.